Good evening and welcome to Words Fest. Words brings the Southwestern Ontario region together for a celebration of creative ideas, artistic expression, and cultural diversity. Words brings London's creativity to the world while introducing our community to new ideas and artistic forms in a highly accessible atmosphere of learning and discovery. My name is Grant Maltman and I'm the curator at Banting House National Historic Site of Canada, and I'm pleased to be your host this evening. As yesterday was World Diabetes Day and Frederick Banting's 130th birthday, we thought we'd try something a little different. 2021 marks the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin, an idea that came from this very room behind me here 101 years ago last month. This story continues today with more discoveries and innovations aimed at further understanding diabetes and enhancing patients' lives. Carrying on Banting's legacy, the ongoing collaborative work of London's research-intensive institutions and hospitals is paving the way for innovation in diabetes research, education, and care. It's often been said that Canada punches above her weight in the field of diabetes research. As a graduate of Western University, and I freely admit I may have a bit of a bias here, I think the same can be said for London, Ontario. I'm excited to be joined this evening by three people Londoners should know. Three people who are making a difference in diabetes research, management, and care, and who happen to be living and working in our midst. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kristin Clemens. Dr. Clemens is an associate professor at Western Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry and an endocrinologist at St. Joseph's Healthcare, London. She's also an adjunct scientist at ISIS and an associate scientist at Lawson Health Research Institute. Her areas of expertise are endocrinology, diabetes, osteoporosis, multimorbidity, kidney disease, health services, and health disparities. We're also joined by Dr. Robert Hegele. Dr. Hegele is a professor at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry and director of the London Regional Genomics Center at the Robarts Research Institute. His areas of expertise are human genetics, genomics, dysploma media, and I butchered that, apologies, Dr. Hegele, high cholesterol, and type 2 diabetes. And last but not least, Dr. Michelle Mottola. Dr. Mottola is a professor at Western's Faculty of Health Sciences and the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry. She's also chair of the Division of Maternal, Fetal, and Newborn Health at the Children's Health Research Institute. Her areas of expertise are developing healthy lifestyles for pregnant individuals to prevent gestational diabetes mellitus and reduce the risk of diabetes and obesity for both mother and children. I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion and hearing about what our guests have to say. My job will be to try to remain quiet, throw out a question, and let them chat as if we're sitting in the grad lounge, as Banting once said, free from debt and worry. Let's make this a free-flowing conversation. There you have it, a couple of minutes in, and already my first Banting reference. I won't lie to you, it won't be my last. I think if we can properly meld some scholarly research with some enthusiastic storytelling, at the end you'll leave satisfied and hopefully wanting more. There is a chat box where you can submit your questions, as we will be leaving some time at the end for a Q&A. So why don't we just jump in? Question one. Frederick Banting became involved in research out of circumstance. There's this misperception amongst the public that he was this trained scientist, when in fact, the only reason he entered the medical profession was because he failed his first year general arts course at the University of Toronto and then switched over to the Faculty of Medicine. He was involved in some important research during the First World War and here at Western under Professor Miller, but only as an assistant, employing his skills as a surgeon. Leaving private medical practice was not something never seriously ever considered. Could you tell us what brought you to diabetes research? Dr. Clemens, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. So when I was doing my training in internal medicine, I developed a love for endocrinology very early on. And what I really loved about the specialty was the ability to see patients of many different ages, many different backgrounds, and many different conditions, endocrine conditions. And when it comes to diabetes, it's really the same story. I think first and foremost, diabetes is a really interesting disease in that it can take so many different shapes and forms. And also people who have this condition are so different. So we have people living with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, elderly individuals, those with genetic causes of diabetes, and it's just such a rich area. And it really, the broad kind of research questions really drove me to want to get involved in diabetes and diabetes related research.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hegele, do you want to chime in here?
Sure, Grant. Well, my story actually does trace back to Banting. So when I got into medical school, I went to U of T. So please don't hold that against me. But I felt that they had made a mistake. I'd gotten in under the radar screen, and I just wanted to lay low and just kind of finish my graduate, and then but then as an intern, there was a formative event. And I was invited. I was doing an internship in internal medicine at Toronto General Hospital, and our chief of internal medicine, as a special treat, invited us to a dinner at the Toronto Academy of Medicine. And there was a guest speaker, and the speaker was Professor Michael Bliss from the University of Toronto. And Dr. Bliss had just written a book on the discovery of insulin. And he was presenting a lecture, and this was maybe one of the very first ones he did. And there was, of course, no PowerPoint in those days. He was using like a Kodak carousel projector and the little 35 millimeter slides, but it was absolutely captivating, and this was when I was an intern. I still had to choose what specialty I was going to go into, and I thought I wanted to do hematology, and so which is hematology oncology, and I was sort of going that way. But then I heard this lecture by Michael Bliss, and then I went and got the book and I read it. And it was like, and it literally changed my life. And I thought, man, this was, and so maybe we can talk about that. But I mean, it is the power of words and the power of literature. And I decided, it was so moving, to hear that story and to read that story. And so that really then kind of, that changed my trajectory. Then I went into endocrinology. I chose that as my subspecialty, and then fortunately I've been able to do research in that. So anyway, that's my story.
Well, that's a great story. Dr. Bliss, as you said, words matter, and he was able to turn a story that through both books, The Discovery of Insulin, for an audience specific, and then one for more generalized with the Banting biography, and he humanized the man, and he gets a lot of people interested in this story and a new version of that story. Before we jump on, Dr. Mottola, do you want to tell us how you came to where you are today?
Sure. My story is not as exciting. I'm an embryologist by trade and an exercise physiologist. And so I have been very interested in metabolism for a long time, and especially looking at metabolism with pregnancy. And there are many really interesting things that happen in a pregnant individual with regards to metabolism. And there are certain things that happen that can potentially push an individual over the edge where they can become gestational diabetic or diabetic during pregnancy. And so lifestyle plays a big part in prevention. And so my background is in preventing gestational diabetes or diabetes during pregnancy, and also to assist in management with regards to a healthy lifestyle. So like I say, I'm a little bit different. We try and prevent people from going on insulin, and insulin is a really exciting thing to have in our arsenal. But my job is prevention.
Well, prevention is key. Insulin is a great tool in the toolbox, but as studies are showing us, it's good, but it's not great. And as we say at Diabetes Canada, we can't wait another 100 years. We have better insulin today. What we don't have is anything better than insulin, but we need to get to that next step. So there's a pretty good first round. We seem to be on track. So we'll jump into question on 2. This is about ideas. So perhaps as an acknowledgement of his own idea that set in motion a chain of events that led to the discovery of insulin, Banting once wrote, "Ideas are greater than men," with two distinguished women on this panel. The statement's a little outdated, but I think the sentiment is there. I was hoping to get each of you to sort of tell the audience, what role has an idea played, if any, in your own research? Was there a particular aha moment that led you to your current research? Dr. Hegele said it was a lecture that got him into the field, but how about a specific project or direction that you're heading in? Why don't we stick with you, Dr. Mottola?
That's a tough question. I think my aha moment was thinking about how lifestyle can assist individuals in controlling their blood sugar. And I think a combination of exercise or even just physical activity and healthy eating can make a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be a large intensity of exercise or anything like that. It can be just basically, it's just a basic movement. So moving muscle, large skeletal muscles. So moving the legs, moving the arms, and just getting the glucose or the sugar from the blood into the moving muscles. And it works with pregnant individuals as well as diabetics. And I think that to me was an aha moment where lifestyle can play a huge role in either prevention or for assisting in normalizing blood sugars.
So really, small changes can make a difference. Great. Dr. Hegele, why don't you tackle this one? Was that aha moment besides Michael's fantastic lecture?
Well, yeah, I guess the advantage of, or the disadvantage maybe of being like an old guy on the panel, but maybe still not having cognitively declined yet, or I don't know, maybe that's debatable, but there's many things that I'll give you one example, Grant. So I trained in the US to learn how to, this is at the early days of the Human Genome Project. This is just when the Human Genome Project was starting to get off the ground, and learning how to read DNA. And so, like, for me now, I've been doing it for 30 years. I mean, for me, like, reading DNA is like using a stethoscope. So like when my patient comes in to the clinic, I ask them about their family, and I ask them about their diet, and I listen to their heart, and I look in their eyes, and then we get their blood, and then from the blood we get their DNA, and then I read their genetic barcode, and that's like part of the physical exam. So for me, so that's sort of the technology that I use. But I will give you one anecdote, which is, so I was referred a patient who had this form of inherited diabetes, and it was a unique. It's kind of a rare condition, not all that rare, but it's like relatively rare, and it's called lipodystrophy, partial lipodystrophy. So this is a condition where the distribution of fat in the body is altered. So in fact, that there is a deficit of fat tissue on the arms and legs, but then the fat stores centrally are spared. And then those patients, then when they gain weight, their arms are very thin and muscular. It's really quite striking. But then when they gain weight centrally, and then most of them develop diabetes, develop insulin resistance, and then they sometimes need huge quantities of insulin to control their diabetes. So this patient came to me, and she was from, around here, maybe about 50 miles from London, and part of a large family. And she came to me to the clinic, and I wasn't like seeing her for research. I was just seeing her for care. Like her lipids were high as well. Her triglycerides were high. And so but then she was sitting there in the clinic, and she said, "Well, you're a geneticist, right?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she said, well, like, is what I have genetic? And I said, yeah, I think so, as far as I know. And then she said, well, what's the gene? What's the causative gene? And I said, well, yeah, good question. Let me go online. And I looked, and in fact, the gene was not known. So it was known that it was a genetic condition, but in fact, the actual causative gene had never been figured out, despite many groups working on it. And she said, well, you're a geneticist, so why don't you tell me, like, so what's the gene? What have I inherited that's causing this issue? And so then I took that as a challenge, and I said, well, okay, not exactly in my wheelhouse right at the moment, but I'll sure, okay, well, I'll go for it. And then that turned out to be quite a successful project. So we actually then did find the gene like, her family was hugely cooperative. And in fact, many of them are still my patients now. So this was around 20 years ago. And so that it turned out, and we were then in a race that we didn't even know that we were in, because like there was a big group from the NIH, and they had like in the United States, and they had like millions of dollars, and they were trying to find the gene. And I didn't even have a grant. I was sort of taking money, diverting money from other from other little projects, leftover funds to try to do this. Anyway, I don't want to, but that's one example. So in that example, it was a patient who challenged me, and then that led to, and that's now one thing my lab is known for, is having discovered the gene for that condition. And now, in fact, this is now 20 years later, we're looking at therapies that are based on knowing the genotype that may be able to help patients with that sort of extreme form of diabetes. Anyway, sorry, I talked too long. Excuse me.
Oh no, that was fascinating. As in the pre-session, we're talking about I too might go down the rabbit hole just listening, so that's fine. You control the mute, so you can get to talk as long as you wish. Dr. Clemens, how would you like to step in here for a moment?
Yeah, so I think for me, the most, the experience that kind of led me to my aha moment was really when I first started on faculty. So I started to cover a clinic that was meant for kidney patients, patients with kidney disease. And we were going to, it was a bit of an outreach opportunity. So we would go into the kidney clinics and help with diabetes. And it would be everything from counseling about diet and starting new insulin therapies, or maybe starting new pills. And I did this clinic probably about 5 times. And I would say about half the time people didn't come. And I said to myself, what's going on? What is it? What's the barrier to coming into clinic? And I really was keen to try to make a difference in people's lives and try to get them on the latest and greatest of medications that we had access to. And at the end of the day, this helped me to realize that people who have complex comorbidities face so many barriers to care. It's not even that they can't attend appointments. It's perhaps that they're too sick to attend. Perhaps they have other family responsibilities. And it really got me thinking about the patient situation, patient experience, and how I could try to better improve the care experience for people who have lots and lots of things on their plate. And so what this turned into was an effort to really look at what was happening provincially in terms of diabetes care in people with kidney disease, and then really working with patients to try to understand what I could do, what we could do to try to improve care and outcomes. And that's kind of led to a couple of other projects to really kind of test an intervention or test a program to see if it could better serve them. So that's been an experience that's really stuck in my head.
Thank you. I think the commonality amongst all three is again, almost like the first question about circumstance. Something comes to you and it sets you off on a different path. And so a bit of a follow-up on that is on the path that you've taken. What brought you to London? And I guess we'll start with you first, Dr. Hegele. It had to be more than just Dr. Kolb's desk.
Yeah, well, although that's there, you can see it behind me there, and that's certainly a big, I mean, that's something I value every day. But yeah, so what brought me to London? I worked at St. Mike's Hospital. So when I finished my training in the United States, and I'm a Toronto guy. I grew up in Don Mills, and then I was always thought I would like go back to Toronto, and I did. And for 8 years, I worked at St. Michael's Hospital and was on the faculty at the University of Toronto. But then this position became available, and it was an endowment made by the Blackburn family. So Martha Blackburn. So the Blackburns, I guess, was like CFPL Radio and London Free Press, a newspaper, and I guess even going back historically, Josiah Blackburn started the London Free Press in the 1800s. So Martha Blackburn had died tragically of early heart disease in her late 40s, was my understanding. And then the family gave funds, money to the university to create a research chair because it was felt to be like, why did this happen? Was there possibly a genetic basis to it? And so I was looking for a new opportunity, a new position. I thought it would be in Toronto, but then in fact, and it was my father-in-law who was reading and noticed that this position was available in London. And I'd visited London, but I have had no prior connection really to London. But I came and visited and absolutely fell in love with the place, and the Robarts and Western and St. Joe's and UH and so then I decided not to go to Mount Sinai in Toronto, and decided, well, take a chance, come here, give it like a 5-year plan, and see what's happening here. So that's anyway. And I've been here for 24 years. So this is the longest I've ever been anywhere, and I can't imagine leaving. So I'm very, very happy to have come from Toronto.
That's thank you for that. It's almost the complete opposite of Dr. Banting when he left London. He says, "I'd rather take a chance and starve in Toronto than stay and starve in London." So we're lucky to have you here and still here. Dr. Mottola, what brought you to our fair city?
I did my undergrad at Western. So my hometown is Niagara Falls, and there was an excellent program in physical education at the time at Western. And so I applied as an undergrad. And so I spent 4 years here, and then went out west for 8 years and did my other degrees. And then there was a job opening at Western that was a joint position between anatomy and cell biology and kinesiology, or in health sciences. At that time, it was the faculty of kinesiology. And so it was perfect for me because of my background. And so I loved London. I thought this was a great place to come back to and raise a family. And I have certainly no regrets. And Western has an amazing reputation, especially in the field of metabolism, certainly, which was my interest. And so, yeah, I think this is a great town.
Fantastic. That's a great answer too, because I'm going to come back to you with a question later on about having you come back to London. Dr. Clemens.
My story is not nearly as interesting as either of the other two. I was born in London, raised in London, went to elementary school, high school, undergraduate. I did my medical school and my master's in epidemiology and my residency training and fellowship in London. So I haven't moved at all. So I'm a Londoner through and through.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I remember I came to London in the I guess early 70s, and I remember as a youth saying, couldn't wait to get out of London, because all anyone would say is London's a great place to raise kids. Well, now that I'm a parent, gosh, London's a great place to raise kids. Moving on, great round, folks. In 1938, Banting made this survey of the research facilities across Canada, and in each city, he basically gave the same speech at every stop. He said, "The science of today is the research of yesterday, and today's research will become the science of tomorrow. A GP can expect to at best to treat 3,000 people per year, but because of research, over 1 million patients are using insulin on a daily basis. To devote one's life to medical research is the greatest contribution towards the welfare of mankind. The problem is, though, doctors conducting medical research in Canada are suffering from a lack of funds rather than from ideas. We must beware the export of brains from the Dominion. We do not do enough to keep these trained young people in our midst." So how do you view the current situation, either personally? I think Dr. Mottola, Western's done something to keep you here, and same with you, Dr. Clemens, and we were able to lure Dr. Hegele here. But are governments at all levels doing enough to keep our best minds in Canada or London, Ontario, for that matter? Are we bringing enough new minds to London? Dr. Clemens, why don't we start with you?
I love doing research, but it is a really hard job. It's true, exactly what you said. It's constant grant writing, constant showcasing projects, constant trying to get funding. And I've got a million ideas, but at the end of the day, only so many will go forward because of that piece. I think the university in particular is really looking to try to build research and keep researchers here in London. I think one of the new strategic priorities of the university really is to try to invest in principal investigators, clinicians, scientists to really try to move that agenda forward. But it's true, it's you've got to really, really love to do it and really want to spend lots of hours at the computer writing grants and writing protocols to keep going with it. And I'm fortunate, I guess, in that I really do love it, and I'll keep pushing through. But it is a difficult space to be in sometimes.
So things haven't changed in 80 plus years. Dr. Hegele, would you like to step in for a moment on this one?
Sure. So, I mean, in addition to what Dr. Clemens has said, I mean, researchers are kind of, unique people. I mean, so like you can offer, so like the thing that we feel, or that I feel gratified by, and I think maybe speaking more broadly, so it's not like, like earning lots of money or cash. Like, so I'm on the lowest part of the socioeconomic scale of my graduating class from medical school. Like everybody has done better than me. So, pretty much, but it's the, but it's then the trade-off is, discovery. So finding out something new, being the first person in the world sometimes to see something new that then later on becomes a fact. We start with, like, where does any knowledge start from? There's a blank page, a little Wikipedia. Well, okay, I look stuff up on Wikipedia, but where does that come from? It's always a blank page to start with, and somebody has to do the research to then create the knowledge. It's just as Banting has said, today's research is tomorrow's knowledge. And it's a continuum with teaching as well, because when we're teaching, we're teaching knowledge, but where did that knowledge come from? Well, somebody had to do the research 10 years ago so that we now have some knowledge to teach to new medical students. So I think research requires, I totally agree with Kristin. I mean, it's a hard slog, and it's sometimes you feel like you're on Dragon's Den. You're just like on a highfalutin version of Dragon's Den, where you're pitching your ideas and trying to, and the success rate of getting funded from, say, government agencies, CIHR or Heart and Stroke or Diabetes Canada, like if we have like a 10% success rate or a 13% success rate, that's like, woohoo, it's like, that's big. But there are many more ideas, many more projects that don't go funded. Anyway, it's a tough life, but it is certainly a very gratifying life. Absolutely.
Yeah, there is something to say about job satisfaction, isn't there? Dr. Mottola, I'm going to same question, but just a bit of a twist with it for you. when Banting was in London, he chastised Londoners for not doing enough to support Western and to keep its young scientists here. London is a philanthropic community, supporting the hospitals, universities, both as individuals and corporate entities. And Dr. Clemens sort of touched on this about what's happening now, but are we doing enough, do you think?
I think we can do better. I think that certainly there's an awful lot of young scientists that are out there that are in competition for postdoctoral fellowships, looking for academic positions across Canada. And I think we can do a lot better in getting those individuals into the university institutions. I think Western is doing a much better job than it used to. I think that Western is definitely looking for young, enthusiastic scientists, clinicians, and I think Western is now also being better at promoting families. So, for instance, one individual that comes to Western as a faculty appointment, Western is also very much aware of the partner of that person and their kids. And I think it's becoming more of a family-oriented place. It wasn't like that before, but I think it's definitely doing that now. And I think Western is trying really hard to promote family life. It's not just academics, and it certainly is very difficult to write grants and write papers and be at the top of your game when you have young children. And so I think that's another issue that is really important, and that is with regards to family life in academia.
Well, that's fantastic. I think if anything, this pandemic has taught us is that this work-life balance really plays a role in all aspects of our lives and for keeping people here. I just want to let everybody know if we are going to try and save some time for some Q&A at the end. So there is a Q&A forum. So if you want to pop in a question there, the folks who are running the show behind the scenes, we'll try and get some up for us before the end. Question 4 sort of ties into the last one. And I think I'm not putting words in anybody's mouths, but I think we can all agree that fundraising is a necessary evil. And that your time is better spent in the lab than researching and stewarding potential funders to support your work. Banting had his own struggles with funding after the discovery of insulin, not necessarily for himself, although there was this one time when he had to drink a number of Tom Collins before breakfast just so he get a $5,000 grant for research for a medical practice. And I don't expect any of you have been having some pre-breakfast drinks, but more often it was a struggle to secure funding for other Canadian researchers. And in one of his writings, he lamented about how he had to pass over an experiment to one of his students, because if he didn't go to Ottawa and speak to cabinet, there was going to be no increase of medical research funding for Canada in the following year's budget. Now, in that context, I had a researcher come through here, and he expressed shock when over the fact that Banting received funding for his research, so a lab, a couple of assistants, some research animals, based on a 25-word post-it note or modern-day text message to a colleague. Surely 25 words are no longer acceptable for any grant application. And Dr. Clemens, you sort of touched on this. Can we talk briefly about what it takes to secure funding for projects, either more generally or one of your own? I mean, we don't have to go into the monetary work, but I think it'd be kind of neat to find out what a widget costs so you can actually do a specific project. I think it's going to be a shock to a lot of people. But how long for a typical grant? How long does it take from the idea, yes, I'm going to go after Foundation X, to possibly getting the check to start the work? And anyone who can just jump in on this one. I think the answer has been great, but I want to make sure we get all the questions in. So whoever wants to jump in, go right ahead.
I think it depends on Well, probably not. I was going to say it depends on the type of research you do, but I was told by my mentor that oftentimes when you want to write a solid research grant, it can take a year of preparation. So if I'm planning to go for a big CIHR grant next fall, I really should be kind of putting pen to paper now and putting in some writing time every day, having colleagues review it, reviewing the science with statisticians. So really a long time in advance, I think will increase your success of funding. So 1 year.
That's just the preparation stage. But then once you've got pilot data, it's really important that you have pilot data before you submit your grant. And then there's no guarantee. I've submitted a grant 3 times in order to get funded. So that's another year of grant cycles. So it can take years to actually go from an idea to actually getting the funding.
So Dr. Hegele, so as both Dr. Clemens and Mottola says, they have a bit of a proper smile on their faces that are describing this process.
Right.
It's not a problem, it's a challenge, as we're taught to say now. But how frustrating is that to you could be in the lab doing work, but you find yourself behind a computer and trying to do peer reviews, or in Dr. Mottola's case, 3 times applying for a project that, in the hope that finally they're going to get it.
Well, that's part of it. You have to develop a thick skin. It's like, and there, like, rejection is a big part of research. And so if you are too sensitive to that, then you should be looking for another line of work. So that's even when we write our papers, and then try to get our papers published in medical journals, or so there's a large part of that is rejection. You work and you put together and you do the hardest job you can, and you spend months writing, and then and it's the same with writing a grant. But then when the grant is written, the grant itself can be 200 pages or 300 pages. So it's and then the grants go to committees, usually that are centralized, that will spend a week, usually in places like Ottawa, where then your colleagues, your peers are brought in. I mean, this is in the days before Zoom. Now we can do it all by Zoom, actually, which is an advance, actually. That has been, but even 2 years ago, we would the panels, the reviewing panels that then would judge the grants would be researchers then from all over Canada, sort of flown into the dark of night, anonymously, and then would sit around like a big round table and would review each grant. And it might be only 20 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes of 15 of your peers passing judgment on what you have written that you have spent a year writing. And then it's like Caligula. It's like, thumbs up or thumbs down on it. Sometimes you will get comments back as to how to make it better for the next time. And our success rates are like I was saying, 10 to 20% success rate. So but that's sort of built into the ethos, that's built into the job.
That's fascinating. So I guess in essence, we have to find a balance somewhere between 25 and 25,000 words to maybe speed this process.
Yes. Yeah. But I think, yeah.
So we have the funding. So everyone's finally, kind of realization, yes, this is the project. So you have the funding, you have the facility to conduct your work, you have your staff team, things hopefully are progressing as you hoped. And then March 15, 2020 arrives, and it becomes a date that's stamped in our mind. If the stress of the announcement of COVID pandemic coming across the globe wasn't enough, the government then tells you, go home, stay home. In my office, one of my colleagues' lunch bags is still on her desk from the last time she came into the office at the first lockdown. Can you put research on hold? How does someone put research on hold? Dr. Clemens, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, the type of research that I do, fortunately, about 6 months prior to the pandemic, had been able to get statisticians and analysts the ability to work from home on secure remote systems. So it actually was very fortuitous that that had happened, because some of the research that I was doing didn't get stalled. Some of the other research that I was doing that involved patient visits, we had to pivot. So we pivoted to virtual. And what we did was we had a certified diabetes educator supporting patients, but she did it by telephone instead of in person. And sometimes those things require amendments to ethics and to protocols. But fortunately, I was able to keep going forward through the pandemic, having not been participating in any major clinical trials.
Great. Dr. Mottola?
The pandemic was hell on our research. We work with pregnant individuals face to face, and luckily for us, we were at the end of a clinical trial, so we had to adapt to finish everything off. And again, we had to go through ethics and talk about our adaptations. But we haven't been able to be in contact face to face with pregnant individuals on campus, because they may or may not be vaccinated and they have young children who are not vaccinated. And so that's been very difficult for us. But we have adapted in that we've gone online. So we are still able to provide individuals with advice on nutrition and physical activity through Zoom or through phone calls, but it's not the same type of intervention as it would have been face to face. But we're doing the best we can, and it's been really tough.
Oh, I can just imagine. We're social beings, and you know, that human contact is something we all crave, and especially when you're trying to get answers out of people, you know, and you want them in that sort of comfortable zone. Dr. Hegele, I'm assuming it's been pretty much the same with you. So I'm going to switch the question up a little bit. Just say, are there any positives or negatives that you could take out of this with your own research with this sort of new normal?
Yeah. So I think now, for instance, I used to travel quite a lot to these meetings and get invited to speak, and I haven't done that. But like just where I'm sitting from now, so I gave, in fact, in one day a lecture in London, UK, and then that evening, like I even forget, like it was like Cape Town or something. So that part of it is, so I definitely miss out on the social element of then, traveling to a conference, meeting from scientists all around the world, having a coffee together, that part. But on the other hand, the online platform is really, really, it has been really practical in a way. We still then can, interact and exchange ideas, and it's not quite as the same as being there. So I'm going to continue that now. In fact, if when I get invited to a meeting in the future, to attend or to speak, my preference actually would be to do it from here. If at all possible, and just be highly selective about traveling. So that's been one benefit for me.
If I can follow up, but in that sense, I mean, when I go to conferences, you get 4 historians in the same room, and make sure we try and play nice in the sandbox with our ideas. Do you think you might miss out, though, you as sort of the general you, about those sort of post-conference dinners? There's some value in those too, aren't there, though?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that networking experience you really do miss out on. It's not the same on Zoom. I think sometimes at the end of conferences, they try to promote question and answer sessions after the plenary session, for example, but they don't tend to be as well attended as if they were in person. So I do definitely miss out on that networking opportunity.
Agreed. And I think it's been really tough on our students, because that's the going to conferences and networking and having your mentor or your supervisor introducing you to people that they know. The whole networking thing, I think, is really unfortunate for students who are not able to travel and not able to meet people through their supervisor. So I think that's been tough, I think, on our graduate students.
Oops, there we go. Yes, I can imagine it's going to be like that for a lot of people. I just noticed the time, and as I'd hoped, this has been going really well, and you folks are doing fantastic. This is something I was supposed to ask about 20 minutes ago, so I apologize. But basically, I'm stealing a technique that I learned at the Department of Endocrinology's Diabetes Update last week, when Dr. Spatch, in the middle of her presentation, just threw in a commercial break, as she called it, and it was brilliant. And so I think I'm going to give it a try. It was a question that's put to us. Doctors, scientists, researchers, and academics even, we're generally viewed as public individuals who are always looking to solve the world's problems 24/7. There's no downtime. When people tour Banting House, our final gallery is Banting's art, and they're all shocked to find out that Banting uses art as this escape mechanism to get away from those societal pressures, both the real and perceived. To a person or visitor say, "You mean he painted too?" So all of a sudden this human element came in. So one of the questions put forward is, what have you been doing during the pandemic in terms of reading, watching, getting back into an old hobby? Anyone want to be brave enough to admit that they got caught up in the Squid Game? Oops, I went and muted myself. Dr. Hegele, you had your hand up first. Why don't you jump in?
Oh, no. Well, no, Squid Game and then Adele last night was amazing. I mean, so there are just, yeah. So for me, it's like podcasts and then, exercise. So I used to go to a gym, and then I stopped doing that. And then I bought, a piece of equipment that's now in my house. That's now the sort of the focus of my life, the elliptical. And so I do that every day on a religious basis. And, and then I have about 10 or 12 podcasts that I really, really like to listen to. And then, read the paper. That for me, that is a big deal. Do the laundry, read the paper. Those are amazing diversions. So
I really got into Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Nothing like a 6-hour podcast. Dr. Clemens.
Oh, at a drop's notice, I can get really involved with my kids at home. So my weekends, well, not during the pandemic, but my weekends now are hockey and swimming and gym classes. And so the weekends are actually more exhausting than during the week. But apart from that, I'm like Dr. Hegele. I'm big into fitness. I like outdoor activities, cycling and running and hiking and spinning, anything that gets me moving. Definitely helps with overall health, but also, there's definitely mental health benefits and stress relief and all those things that go along with it. So I really enjoy that.
Yes, it is nice to get away from the laundry and telling kids to go to their room. Dr. Mottola.
I'm the same way. I think physical activity is a marvelous stress reducer, and it certainly works really well for me. So either walking or hiking, jogging. I'm a jogger. I would say run, but that's not what I do anymore. It's more jogging. But that keeps me sane, and certainly that any type of physical activity is I think powerful as a stress reducer. And I like reading. I can't remember the last time I actually picked up a novel, but during the pandemic, I've been able to do that. Instead of just reading research papers, I've been able to pick up a novel. And so I think those are really good stress relievers.
Yeah, I took up reading a bit too, historical novels. So it's kind of work related, but it was but the same. a question here, and then we're going to go to some questions from the viewers. So during Banting's period, collaboration between those in private practice, hospitals, universities is far different than it is today. For example, Banting wasn't allowed to give the first injection at that first, we'll call it human clinical trial, because he couldn't get privileges at Toronto General Hospital. And there's several potential reasons for that we don't have to go into. I think the point is that today's world, collaboration is key. I can imagine conducting research in a hospital setting versus an academic or institution one can produce some challenges, teaching commitments, access to patients, to name a few. Can you speak to the importance of collaboration and working within a lab with students, postdocs, and other researchers in your own work? Dr. Hegele, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Oh yeah. So the students. So first of all, so collaborations are absolutely essential. I mean, it's like an orchestra. So research is like a team effort or an orchestra rather than like a soloist. That's the first thing. And then the students are my source of like keeping me on my toes and like new ideas. I mean, yeah, so absolutely. And then, with collaborators, when we deal with collaborators, it's like dealing with people. I try to choose people that, like Dr. Clemens and I've had a collaboration. I mean, a really super nice person. I try to choose nice people to collaborate with. So because, it's not all collaborators are necessarily nice. So anyway, those are just some random thoughts.
Very polite and a good place to stop. Dr. Clemens, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love collaborative research as well. I do a lot of research in multimorbidity, so have nephrologists and internists that I always turn to for projects. It doesn't make sense for me to be digging into the back of my mind or looking at textbooks about nephrology when we've got very well-trained, knowledgeable folks that can contribute very, very highly to projects. I've done some collaborative work with patients too, which is really a very cool experience because they bring the patient experience, right? They know what they've lived with, and they can come up with some really cool solutions for healthcare gaps, and even knowledge users. So policymakers. I've done a little bit of work with Health Canada, Environment Canada as well. So outside of the university, again, just everyone brings a wealth of expertise and insight, and can be really useful to projects.
We're closing in on time. So Dr. Mottola, I'm going to get you to answer the next question for me. And it's one from one of the people watching today. And it ties into my question here. So yesterday's World Diabetes Day. The world came together to commemorate the discovery of insulin, Banting's birthday. We lit up monuments blue to raise awareness of the seriousness and of diabetes. But 100 years after the discovery of insulin, as I said earlier, we have better insulin, but still nothing better than insulin to treat those living with diabetes, particularly type 1. And a common question I get at the museum is, how close are we to a cure? And I know that's an unfair question to ask you to kick us off, but so we don't have to try and answer it that way, but what does a potential cure possibly look like? Pancreatic islet cells, transplants. The question is life without insulin a pipe dream? Perhaps we'll get you, and then maybe we'll get Dr. Hegele to jump in right after.
Yeah, I'm not the person to ask, but certainly I don't think we're close yet. But again, this is not my area, not my field, but I think we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah, my apologies. It was your turn on my list, and I realized the question. I promised you no hardball questions, so I owe you one. Rob, Dr. Hegele, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think progress is being made. I think there will be something. I think what we're looking for is like to normalize the quality of life, and so the person's like constantly thinking about insulin all the time, or like their blood sugar levels, that they're able to just kind of focus on normal things, so that whether that's like a closed loop, sort of pancreatic system that's all electronic, or whether it's solved by, these, islet cell transplants, which have been going on for a while, but, seems to be incrementally getting better. There are these new genetic technologies that hold a lot of promise, possibly, that may allow for kind of a one and done treatment for certain forms of diabetes. So I think there may not be one cure for everybody all at once, but I think incrementally it's going to get better, and I think it's just going to be sort of step by step, and over the next 10 years, I think is going to be super exciting. What do you think, Kristin?
Yeah, I agree. We have some amazing scientists. I was reading Dr. Hess's profile on the recent publication from the university, and stem cell derived beta cells, and Dr. Hegele's work. So we've got some amazing scientists that are all at hard work trying to come up with a cure. I sure hope we get there for type 1 and some monogenic forms of diabetes. I think type 2 is a whole other kettle of fish, and we probably don't necessarily need to spend too much time there, just to say how important it is to have Dr. Mottola's work on perinatal maternal health, and we have to think a lot more broadly to broach type 2, social determinants of health, et cetera, et cetera. But type 1, I do hope that there's something that comes along.
And from a layman's perspective, I can echo that excitement within your community, because I'm fortunate that I get to see these researchers from around the world who come here, and I've been here 30 years now, and to see how people talk about their research, it'd be, I have 5 mice doing what I want. By the time I get to 325, I'll found the flaw in the work, but there's still value in this failure. Now it's, I have 5 mice doing what I want. I only need 10,005 more, and there's this real excitement within the community. I'm going to just throw this one out because we're going to be wrapping up soon. Does anybody want to take on this one from the audience? Why do you think the government is so hesitant to cover the cost of diabetes supplies and medication? They're costing us a fortune. Now, I know you're not about public policy, but obviously cost affects treatment, ability to participate in the research as patients, as clinical trials. Want to weigh in a little bit on it, or just keep on mute and I'll try the next question?
Well, I'll just make a comment that it was really ironic. So that Banting and Best and Collip sold the patent for insulin. If you can imagine, the patent for insulin, they sold it to the University of Toronto for $1. And then the University of Toronto then used it to build all these buildings on College Street, the Banting and Best Institute and so on. So I couldn't imagine that happening today. And that was like for the real insulin, like the actual, first. And so now we're just totally in a different world. And it's the reasons are complicated, and there's the big, I don't want to blame corporations or pharmaceutical companies, but then they have their expenses that they have to worry about as well. But so I think part of it is just that the whole world has changed in terms of if we look at the situation 100 years ago, just culturally compared to the kind of world we're living in today.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to want to jump this one. We have someone following us from the United States. My son, who's now 11, was diagnosed with type 1 age 3. Where is the research in Canada with TrialNet, the autoimmune markers that predict who will have type 1 and direct family members of someone with type 1? I think you touched a bit on that earlier, Rob, with Dr. Hegele, with one of your earlier projects. Do you want?
Yes, so TrialNet, I'm going to punt this one over to Kristin, hopefully. Yeah.
I know TrialNet is still going on. Dr. Hegele, I think, was involved, but honestly, I'm not sure where we're at with that. I know that it is still an active research program though, but unfortunately I can't give many more details beyond that.
Well, thanks for trying. In our couple of minutes left, I just waiting to find out how long we've got, because it is 8 o'clock, and when we did start this, they said if we went a little long, that would be okay. I just had a couple really sort of short answer questions that people were asking about. Anybody have a recommended reading about diabetes or insulin that the public might want to get in? Rob has already, Dr. Hegele was already mentioning Michael Bliss's. I'll throw out Fred and Marjorie, which you may or may not be aware of. It's an award-winning graphic novel that's about the Toronto team's most famous canine, Marjorie, the dog that was on insulin for 75 years. Spoiler alert, the dog dies, but it's still a great way to tell the story to a youth audience. Is there something out there that either colleagues should be reading or the general public?
I admit I've not read a book about insulin, and I absolutely should. So I'm just going to soak up your recommendations, Grant, and try to pick up a copy.
It's the University of Toronto just released the 35th year anniversary edition of The Discovery of Insulin by Michael Bliss. And there we are. And Dr. Hegele has it right there. And my good friend, Dr. Allison Lee, did the intro to it, and she's the call-up biographer. I really, if you haven't had it, and if you haven't read it in 35 years, I'd encourage everyone to read it. And if you're not really into the science of it, the Banting biography is a fantastic look at it's a story that's well known, but maybe not known well. Anything you wished I asked that I didn't? We have just a couple of minutes left. Who wants to jump? Let's start with you, Dr. Mottola. Any parting words for the audience?
I don't have any parting words for the audience. I think that this has been very informative, and thank you very much for inviting us as panelists. I've certainly learned a lot listening to my two colleagues. I think that this is a very exciting field. I think metabolism is a very exciting field. And I think you can rest assured that all of us here are very much involved in trying to solve the issues, solve the problems, but it's not easy. And I guess everybody needs to be patient with research. But definitely, I think this is a very exciting time for us.
Thank you. Dr. Clemens.
Yes, I agree with that. It really is exciting. I think insulin's been absolutely a wonderful innovation. And as you mentioned, many new types of insulins now available that have great benefits for patients. I think the other thing for our audience to know about is how far we've come with other diabetes therapies. So we have pills and other injectable medications that can reduce hospitalizations for heart failure, stroke. We have treatments in diabetes and even outside of diabetes that can now help people lose weight. So drug therapy has been moving leaps and bounds in diabetes, and it's been a really exciting time.
Fantastic, thank you. And Dr. Hegele, we'll give the last word to you.
Well, thanks. And Kristin kind of stole my thunder a little bit because of this. I mean, it's amazing to have all of these treatments. So I remember back, I was still prescribing animal insulin as an intern, beef and pork insulin. So to see now, that where we are with all of the treatments for patients. So it's a good time for doctors. I guess it's never a great time for patients, but I think it's better for now for patients than it was certainly, a generation ago for sure. And we have a lot to look forward to. And I think we will, things will happen that may surprise us. And I think, Western is a great place. I think we have to support, I think the community. I think Western is a real gem and has given a lot, not just to the community, but to the world. And I think we need to recognize that.
Well, thank you very much. As a little anecdote for better for patients, I remember on a tour, a woman used to keep her whetstone in her purse. Used to use to sharpen her syringes, to take the burrs off. And the other woman on the bus tour with her said, "You had a whetstone. My father used the bricks on the side of the house to straighten out my syringes." And so we'll leave it at that. That's all the time we have. I'd like to thank Dr. Kristin Clemens, Dr. Robert Hegele, and Dr. Michelle Mottola for agreeing to join us this evening. Thank you to the team behind the scenes for this evening's event. I've had a blast, and I hope you did as well. And lastly, thank you to the viewers for tuning in this evening. I hope we left you wanting more. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.